Okay, go to 3 John for a minute. Let's underline in 3 John. I want to tell you a story about 3 Christians. And the story of 3 Christians is about, so the entire book is about one thing, relationships. Whereas I just hammered away on truth, now I'm going to hammer away on relationships, okay? So we're all going to be related by the end, okay? All right, let's do the underlining. This is a tale of 3 Christians. Verse 1, the elder to Gaius. Verse 3, I was glad, brethren testified, you are walking in truth. I was glad, brethren testified, you are walking in truth. Verse 5, you are acting faithfully for brethren and especially strangers. You are acting faithfully for brethren and especially strangers. Verse 7, they went accepting nothing from Gentiles. 8, therefore, support. Now I want you to go up to verse 1 and circle, I know you underlined his name, but circle Gaius. Circle Gaius, okay. Then go down to verse 9 and circle Diotrophes. And go to verse 12 and circle Demetrius. There are 4 people in the passage. The elder, Gaius, Diotrophes, and Demetrius. In my Bible, I drew a line between Gaius and Diotrophes and Demetrius, and I ended up with a tale of 3 people that he's writing to. There's actually 4 people, including him. Okay? Now, verse 9. Diotrophes does not accept what we say. Diotrophes does not accept what we say. Verse 10, end of the verse, he forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out. He forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out. Verse 11, do not imitate evil, but good. Demetrius has good testimony. You can put an A, okay, a good testimony. Demetrius has a good testimony. That's it. Okay, let me read you the book as I have it underlined. The elder to Gaius, I was glad, brethren testified, you are walking in truth. You are acting faithfully for brethren and especially strangers. They went accepting nothing from Gentiles, therefore support. Diotrophes does not accept what we say, he forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out. Do not imitate evil, but good. Demetrius has good testimony, or a good testimony. Okay? Now, what you see is John writing to Gaius and telling Gaius about 2 other men. I want you to see the 3 models that we have. First, let's talk about the server that impacts others, and that's in verses 1 through 8. Gaius is a servant. He's a server. Or let's use the word servant since it's more appropriate. Servant that impacts others. And we're going to do that in verses 1 through 8. Then after that, we'll look at Diotrophes. Diotrophes is the rebel that attacks others. And finally, we end up with Demetrius, and Demetrius is more the, let's use the word example. The example that draws others. You might also use the word attracts others. All right, take a look at these three men. First, what's a person of impact? He writes to Gaius, and Gaius's first description is the relationship between between John and Gaius. And what is the first description in verse 1? That they have a love in truth. That is, that they have a truth basis to their love that connects them together, and a loving basis to their truth that connects them together. The second thing I notice is he says, I pray that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health. There's a growing sense in Gaius's life. That is, that he's growing, and John is encouraging his growth. So let me say it this way. Gaius has a life that impacts others. He's not stagnant, he's growing. In verse 2, he's growing. And he wants him to grow not only in spiritual and emotional things, but also in physical things. He's asking for God for his health. The third thing that I notice is that he has a testimony of truth. Where do I see it in verse 3? Where's his testimony of truth? So other brothers say, you're doing the right thing, you're walking in truth. So he has a testimony that is based on truth. And that's something that if you want to make an impact in the world, don't just be this loving person that everyone can push over. Be a person who has a great deal of compassion and love, but stands absolutely on the truth. Nobody respects a person who folds every hand, okay? You're going to have to declare, when are you going to stand for something? Gentlemen, you need to understand that what they're looking for in you is a man who will stand in a storm, not just fold. The reliability. Look at verse 4, and you'll also see, I have no greater joy than this, to hear that my children are walking in truth. He goes on and says that you are acting faithfully in what I would say is hospitality. Verses 5 and 6. You take in people, you are accomplishing things for the brethren, and especially the word strangers is guests, travelers. So he says, you're doing an appropriate thing concerning these who are traveling. Now, just a little backstory. The people he's talking about are traveling speakers. And what he's saying is that Gaius is open to people coming with a message from God from other places. Diotrophes is totally against that because he's protective of everything that is said. You're going to find some people with a competitive spirit in Christianity, and you're going to find other people with a giving spirit in Christianity. This is a guy, Gaius, with a giving spirit. He's ready to help people who need help, even if they don't add any fortune, fame, power, or pleasure to him, or they don't add numbers to his church. The ultimate goal of Gaius was to treat people well and have a great public testimony, not to simply do what would benefit Gaius's local church. Okay? And verse 7, it says, they went out for the sake of the name, that is, they went out in Jesus' name, doing kingdom work, accepting nothing from Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support such men so that they may be fellow workers with the truth. They were discerning about where they took income and support from. We need to be careful. Just because somebody flashes money at you doesn't mean you should take it. Very often, how many of you know that some gifts come with strings? Okay, you're going to need to be careful about where you receive. It says, I'm so glad that you're helping these guys because they went out not receiving money from the people outside the faith. They went they went out with only believers to help them. And when they came to your door, you helped them, and that was a testimony of your hospitality. Guys, it's going to become increasingly necessary for Christians to begin to understand the need for hospitality. Look, when the church can't be the place where we reach people, the home has to be. That's what's going to have to be the case. And so we're going to have to be the kind of people that have people, invite people, care for people. And when people know that you take care of them, remember, people don't care what you know until they know that you care about them. Okay? They don't care what you know until they know that you care about them. All right, let's look at Diotrophes for a minute. Look at this rebel that attacks others. What is your sense of this guy? You only have 2 verses. I wrote something to the church, but Diotrophes, who loves to be first among them, does not accept what we say. So he has rejected the authority of John in a letter John has sent to the church. Diotrophes is apparently someone who is a key leader in a local church that got a letter from John and said, nope, we're not doing it. So he, at the outset, shows a disrespect, because rebels at their core are disrespectful. And people have to learn respect. Verse 10. For this reason, if I come, I will call attention to his deeds, which he does, unjustly accusing us with wicked words. He not only has shown contempt and rebellion and lack of respect, deceit. He's saying things that are deceitful. He's making our words wrong, and he's saying things we never said. And I'm going to call him out directly. Well, John, that's not love. You keep telling them to love one another. No, it's absolutely love when you call out what's wrong. It's absolutely love when you call out what's wrong. And he says, and not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive the brethren either, and he forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out of the church. So he's a person in a pastoral or a leadership position that's kicking people out of the church who are hospitable to anybody's words but his. Dictatorial. He's cornered the market on truth. There is no other person who should be giving the truth, and if anyone brings anything else, he throws them out. Don't help them, because I'll throw you out if you do. Do you also see an underlying defensiveness in him? Watch for defensiveness in your own testimony. Guys, let me tell you, I mean this to be honest and biographical and transparent. In 30-some years of ministry, I've been attacked repeatedly. I'm not whining at you. So have all my colleagues who've been around 30-some years. It goes with the territory. It's like a goalie saying, they took shots at me. That's the job, okay? Don't stand in the goal if you don't want them taking shots at you. The reality of the situation is that what has had to change in the 30-some years isn't the nature of the attack, but the nature of my response. What has to happen is I have to change. First of all, do you know how many years it took me as a pastor to learn that I was the goalie? Once you see yourself as the goalie, then people kicking the ball at you is not weird. It's just normal. Okay? You have to understand that the enemy does that. He knows if he can take out the goalie, he can score the point. That's why he goes after the goalie. Not just the goalie, but he goes after the goalie. Okay? Look, keep your focus and understand that if you become defensive, you become unusable to God. Demetrius was walking around trying to produce something good. Gaius was walking around trying to produce something good, and Diotrophes was running his own defensive game. Defend Jesus, but not you. Defend Jesus, but not you. When I was a young person, I was what was called a preacher boy. Back in the dark ages, that was guys who were going to go into ministry. And our church split. I was no part of that split. I didn't do it. I don't care what anybody says. I wasn't a part of it, okay? But I watched my senior pastor, who had been there, since the dark ages, and he was a fixture in that church. I think he was 30-some years there by the time I got there, okay? And I watched him. People hounded him. And a lot of what they said were just flat-out lies. I knew the man very well, and I knew he may have had his foibles, but not what they were saying. Okay? About 100 people sheared off and started another church. And I kept, as a young man, going, you got to answer them. They're saying lies. And he said, you defend Jesus, not yourself. You defend Jesus. And he just looked at me and he said, Randy, come on. Do you know how many lost people there are in this town? 100 people left our church. We can fill those seats again. And this time we can do it with conversions from people who are in darkness. Let's not focus on whether or not they're happy with us. They're not happy with us. They're not going to be happy with us. Let's move on. I thought that was so weak. Now, years later, I see that that was incredible strength. The ability to shoot back is far weaker than the ability to not shoot back. To be slapped and turn another cheek is incredibly strong. Okay? The guy's defensive. Get down to Demetrius. Let's finish this out. By the way, verse 11 makes very clear, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Who is the evil one he's talking about? Diotrophes, don't do what he's doing. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil is not seeing God. Wow, what a swipe. I mean, seriously. He just said, Diotrophes does evil, evil doesn't know God. Let's move on. Wow, that's pretty brazen. By the way, I got to tell you about John. John, the writer of this, we have only a couple stories about what he was like late in his life. How many of you remember John was one of the sons of thunder? Which means he was one of those guys that stuff popped out of his mouth that maybe shouldn't have. Here's my great encouragement. The man was a senior citizen. He was in an active theological debate with another guy in town who thought himself to be a pastor of equal quality to John. John goes into the bath. We have this from a 2nd century source. John is in the bath, bathing in the Roman bath, and this other loudmouth pastor that disagrees with him comes through the door. And John stands up and goes, "We must leave. Perhaps the building will fall on us." And he puts on his cloak and leaves. What I love about that story is John never got over his same impulsive nature. God used him to create churches, to the book of Revelation, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, the Gospel of John. Come on, 5 big books, a big chunk of the New Testament. And the guy could never get past the fact that he had a fiery temper. Demetrius has a good testimony. Look at what attracted others. First of all, it doesn't say he's a good man. What does it say? It doesn't say he's a good man. He has a good testimony, meaning other people feel good about the way he reflects Jesus. That's a good thing. And it says that it's not just from some people, but it's from everyone and from the truth itself. That is, he's known as a guy that other people like to be around, and he's known as a guy who keeps the truth moving. You want something said of you? I would love Demetrius's epitaph to be mine. People knew that he was a nice guy who really worked hard for the community and stood for the truth. Boy, what a great thing to have said about you. And then it says, we add our testimony. Now he's got the respect of John. Since John was the youngest of the disciples there from the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, how cool would that be to have an endorsement from like John the Apostle, you know? I mean, forget my resume. That's the only line I need. John thinks I'm cool. Okay, I'm good. And then it says, and you know that our testimony is true. I have the respect of the fellowship, John says, and I'm telling you this guy's good. Now, and he ends up saying, there's a lot of other stuff I wanted to write to you, but I really can't write to you. I just had to write to you about these 3 guys. I had to write to you, Gaius, about these 2 other men, one of them who is rejecting us and one of them who has a good testimony. Part of what I love about 3 John is that he doesn't just give you the bad guy, he also gives you a good one. Again, showing that there has to be balance in this. Don't just send the criticism. Look, let's say you get involved with a Bible study and you find yourself surrounded by people, and there's a couple people in there just whining and just being negative and whatever. You can address that by saying, well, I'm leaving, and I'm leaving because you're like this and you're like this. But really, a better way to address it would be to say, you know, there's 5 people at our study. And I got to tell you, 2 of you have really spoken into my heart because I see this pattern happening. And 2 of you are just making me crazy because I see this happening. Constant whining, constant panic. Are all of you aware that every study you're going to get into, there's going to be 1 or 2 of them that are all like Fox News'd out and all upset and the world's gone to hell in a handbasket and don't you understand? That's what's going to happen. It's part of our times. And they don't know how not to snipe. You know why? Because we haven't learned what it means to live as a minority, surrounded by a majority of people who don't not only believe what we believe, but don't like what we believe. Go to the Middle East, where that's been true for generations, and what you'll find is people don't get quite so whiny about persecuting events. They sort of anticipate that any day that they're not persecuted is a really good day. We're going to have to grow the Church of Jesus Christ in America to the point where they can be a minority voice in their community without walking around thinking that somebody stole their lunch. By the way, someone stole their lunch. We built the community and they're stealing it. I get that. So get over it, because you don't control that. You can't do anything about it. You have to know when to fold, okay? You have to know. And you have to move on and not make your life about how, I mean, do you have friends like this? Panicking every ISIS is going to come and start a camp next to your house and they're going to steal your guns and the government's going to take away your children and, okay. What do you want me to do about all that? How about I settle down and think about, you know what, my next door neighbor needs Jesus today. How old is John? If he was, let's say, 15, 16 when he meets Jesus, that means he is in his 80s at the point in which he's writing this, which means it's written more like this.